From the moment I saw the Hammerhead Corvette approach and slam into the Star Destroyer in Rogue One, I knew I wanted my own model and a forever piece of one of these ships. The Hammerhead is unique, it's special purpose, and I think it's one of the coolest ships in the Star Wars universe. This video is my journey of building and detailing a Hammerhead Corvette. I hope you enjoy this journey with me. Let's get to work. So looking around for a few 3D printable models, what I wanted to look for was just a solid built base structure. So I went to BigBangCollectables over on Etsy, and they have a Hammerhead Corvette, and this is not the model from Rogue One. This is a bit different. Some of the main differences are this model has 3 engines, where the Rogue One Hammerhead has 4 engines. The side pods are a bit different, but overall I think the functionality is basically the same. The goals of this project are not to make a movie prop, and I think by not doing the exact same model, I think that gives me a little bit of freedom to, add some details that I want to add, make this more my model. I mean, why not, right? I'm okay with printing one that's not the Rogue One model. It's still a cool Hammerhead Corvette, and I don't feel like I'm locked in to try to make an exact movie prop clone. I started this project over a year ago, just after getting a resin printer and getting into printing a little bit more. So I was going through a couple variations of resin before I settled on the red clay colored Elegoo ABS-like. Some of the prints are just trying a resin and trying to use that up and just trying different things. Also of note in the pictures, this is some of the first things I'd ever printed. So learning the slicer tools. The Elegoo comes with Chichu box, but I decided that I really liked starting to use the lychee slicer. But this was all part of that learning experience of learning how to do supports. But more importantly, the supports with resin printing is learning about how the print head creates suction in the liquid resin as the printer head moves up. So it's really important to punch holes in different parts of the model as well as the supports. Otherwise, with that suction, you can have a lot of warping. So you'll see some of these pictures that, especially on the rear of the ship, those are some of the first things I printed. There's definitely some warp lines, just kind of goofy looking, almost a melted looking effect on some of those. So these are pretty big pieces, and it was quite a bit of resin to just reprint those. So I opted to either just print a piece and attach that, or a bit of patching with styrene. The styrene, as it turns out, was a bit of a gateway to the customization and doing some extra Greebles and so on. So that's how that process evolved was, I thought I made it better by doing that already. That idea just started becoming wildfire in my mind. I decided early on with this build that I wanted a bridge with a crew. So first thing I did was I imported the GAM body file of the bridge window into Tinkercad and then just created rectangle shape as holes to create the windows. For the bridge measurements, I measured the inside of the bridge area of the model. It was kind of a weird shape. It was a circle with a rectangle. So just measured each one of those, mashed those shapes together in Tinkercad, and did a floor and a ceiling of that. And then just simply created consoles using simple rectangle and square shapes. In addition to having the crew on the bridge, I wanted to put some lights in there. And it's such a small space that I just think LED lights would just look kind of strange. It'd either be too bright, it would not be even lighting. Being wall mounted, you'd end up looking directly at the LED lights. Seemed like a good reason or excuse to give fiber optics a try. That way I could minimize the number of LEDs. I could have a couple different colors. So in software, I punched a few holes in the ceiling, the walls, as well as the console screens. So with the console screens, I could run a fiber optic line into the console and it would light up the crewman's face. So it would look like they're looking at a screen. So you have top-down lights plus their face would be lit. I thought it'd be a pretty cool effect, so worth the extra effort. For the figures, I found various STL files for Star Wars Rebels. They were all standing, so I ended up just making multiple clones of the same figure and just cutting off from the hips down and then from the knees down, and then just rotated like the thighs and just mashed them back together to make it look like they were sitting. A little rough, but small enough to where it seemed to work okay. And for the commander console, I left that person standing. He may look a little bit like Luke Skywalker. So we'll have a little fun here. A print, a test fit, simple prime and paint, and then stuff the fiber optics, and then a few LEDs and done. I love this. I love the way this came out. Evenly lit, their faces are lit. You know, it was a great learning experience to use the fiber optics, and I'm so going to do this again. On to the nose details. After staring at some reference photos, I ended up investing a fair amount of time copying a bit of the details on the front of the ship. Since the Hammerhead is such a unique nose, the overall structure of the front of the ship from Big Bang Collectables is great, but I wanted a few more details. From looking at the pictures, as far as I can tell, there is a movable mechanism that acts as a impact shield that lowers to cover the bridge window. In addition to that, when closed, it looks like the part above and the part below the window link together as a structural component. So when the hammerhead rams into another structure, that energy would be dissipated across the front of the ship and the superstructure. That's super cool. But then I was thinking, does that ruin the scene a little bit in Rogue One? That this should have been closed before they slammed into that Star Destroyer? So I'll try not to think about that too much. Here's a side-by-side comparison of a reference picture and my interpretation of the nose details. This was so much fun to try and figure this out. I really enjoyed the detail and trying to engineer this just based on a couple of reference pictures. The white pieces are all styrene. The brown bits are resin printed. Some other details include a touch of brass wire. The green piece is part of a tear-off from an ice cream container. The yellow circle is a button from a sewing kit. And the green wires are just spare Christmas tree ornament wires. It's fun to use random interesting bits and bring them together. I knew I was going to be adding small styrene bits to the hull, and CA sticks immediately to resin unless you use the really thick. Just really doesn't give enough working time for me. I like to stick things on and then tune them. Always kind of fiddling with bits as I stick them on. It's just the way I do it. So I really didn't want to stick styrene bits directly onto the resin. So I decided to copy a technique that I learned from Night Shift models, where he adds a coating to all of his armor tanks. It's just a simple mix of Mr. Cement S and Tamiya Quick Type Putty. And I'd done this previously as a follow-along lesson where he built a Warhammer tank. And I really wanted to learn this technique. So for this, I went ahead and I coated the model with this, and it just really helped a lot because then I could use Mr. Cement S to just easily stick and adjust all the styrene. Because as soon as you put this Mr. Cement S there, it'll kind of melt that putty a little bit, and it just really like sets the pieces into that putty. It just worked out fantastic. It's stronger, and I'm really glad I did this. It didn't take that much extra time. It took maybe like one tube of the Tamiya putty to coat the whole model, and maybe half a bottle of the Mr. Cement S. Just well worth it. Just gives me that working time. The Greebles were a mix of a few different model parts, quite a bit of styrene, just a lot of styrene scraps I have from various leftover cuts, a little bit of brass wire on the recess parts on the front of the ship and along one part of the hull, And then I also found some just generic Greebles on Thingiverse, and I scaled those down to 10 or 15% of their normal size. So I wanted a lot of like fine detail. So yeah, I'm really happy with those. The primer I used is Mr. Surfacer 1000 and the Mr. Surfacer Thinner. This is an amazing product as a primer, but it's really important to ventilate the space and wear a respirator. You'll see behind the model I have my slapped together trifold paint booth. So that booth has a filter screen that I can replace, and it also has a tube with an inline fan that vents to an outside window. It works pretty well. I went with the trifold just because I could bring the sides in narrow or make it wide for a big model like this. So after the primer, the base color, I did end up using rattle cans. So this is the AS20 rattle cans, which is the unofficial Star Wars ship base color, I think. I did the step outside, just really nice weather, sun, no wind. So I opted to do the rattle can outside, just better ventilation, and obviously much better lighting. Next up is the yellow paint. I decided to skip the boring part where I added the tape. I thought I would just show the fun stages of painting and tape removal. For the yellow, the look I wanted was a high degree of chipping and wear. Before putting down the yellow paint, I opted for 2 layers of the AK Interactive heavy chipping fluid. The yellow paint I used was a custom mix left over from a Warhammer Sicaran battle tank project that I showed earlier, but here it is painted. I ended up making way too much paint during that project because it was a custom mix and had some left over. That yellow was too bright, so I decided I needed to darken a little bit, as well as more of a mustard yellow. Always good to use up the old paint. So after applying the paint to activate the chipping fluid, it's just water with a brush and stab at it. And you can go as light or as heavy as you want with the chipping. A little bit here and there of some scrapes just with an old airbrush needle. But for the most part, all the chipping was just done with water and a good brush. There's definitely a gap on that turret mount, but this is the wall facing side, so I sacrificed the spacing on this one to make the pretty side line up. So ignore that gap. It's going to be up against the wall. I do hope that you're enjoying this content as much as I am making this content. And if so, please like and subscribe. Help me grow the channel. I appreciate it. Oh, I just got enough experience points to unlock apprentice level for tape masking. Nice. Okay, so far so good. Pretty happy with the color and the weathering. This ship has some stories to tell. I like it. After the yellow was done, next up was adding gray to the mechanical sections. So a lot of taping, but yeah, again, I won't show you applying the tape. I'll just show you, for the most part, painting and tape removal. Sure do enjoy the tape removal part. It's fun. After the gray was applied to the mechanical sections, I added some lighter tones with just a shade lighter gray with sponge and some dry brushing. And then also added a secondary lighter gray on a few of the panels. This gray has a little bit of a bluish gray to it, but it's real subtle, but yeah, it really breaks up the panels quite a bit. It's a cool look. After these base coats were on, I took the ship outside and gave it a clear coat with the Krylon matte and just let that dry overnight. Just wanted to protect that base coat. I noticed that as I kept working around that yellow, it continued to chip. So I really needed to get a clear coat on it to protect it before doing any wash. For the wash, I tested a few different methods, and there are several ways I could have gone with the wash. I could have gone for like a Vallejo Model Air with water. I could have gone with oil paints, but based on the amount of base wash I needed to apply on this size of a model, I decided to just do a base with the Vallejo FX Black. And I thought I would put that wash just on the gray sections. This Wash FX has almost like an inked type of staining to it. So I decided I was not going to put this on the yellow parts. I think it would really change that yellow color too much. The wash has some sediment in it. It is acrylic, which is nice. So that was another reason for going this route. but it does have some sediment in it, so I needed to shake this well, put it into a container that I could put my brush in, and then keep stirring that as I'm using it. But brush on full coverage initially. And what's nice about the Vallejo FX is it's very controllable. And being acrylic, you can keep it as dark as you want or as light as you want by just using a paper towel. If you want to keep it dark, just use a dry towel. If you want to keep it light, just increase the moisture on the towel. The wetter the towel is, the more that will be removed. So I really like that about the Vallejo FX. It seemed like I had complete control over the wash. So, on very detailed areas, the wash would stay really dark around the recessed parts of the details, but I could really brush off the high spots and keep those really clean. It really gave me a lot of contrast and control. For the yellow sections, I'm going to use the AK Interactive Dark Yellow Wash. It's what I used on the Warhammer tank. This one is enamel based, similar to the Tamiya panel line wash. So put it on and then come back with a clean brush with some white spirits on it, and that'll help clean up any of the staining or clean up any of the high spot. Really workable, but it's not acrylic, so water won't work. I think I'm probably going to end up going back, maybe with the Tamiya panel line and going back over the actual lines. But we'll see. I'm going to let this dry first, take a look at it holistically, and if I need to come back, I will. But I really like the Vallejo FX for this. A little bit goes a long way, and it's very controllable. And because of that, I'm probably going to see what other colors they have and maybe pick up maybe a gray and a yellow. Seem like they'd be handy. At this point, I'm 2/3 of the way through the wash, and I need to take a short break from this for two reasons. One is I want to start working on the base that will hold the ship and the mounts to the wall. The second reason for taking a short break, I'm not really happy with these nuts that I embedded in the side of the ship with JB Weld epoxy. I started putting a bit of threaded rod into those and they wiggled. So that is not going to be sturdy enough. So I need to get the veneer glued to the base, and while that's drying, I need to work on a new mounting system for the base. So when the base is done, I can mount the ship to that base as I finish up the wash. I have this about 90% figured out in my head, and I need to get those out of my head and onto the table saw. With the board shape cut, next was to figure out how to keep it on the wall. Really, the only choice for me was to use a French cleat system. That's just simply a board cut at an angle lengthwise. One piece gets mounted on the wall, and the other piece mounts to the board that is the base and just hangs on the board that's on the wall. This is a very common way to hang kitchen cabinets to allow those cabinets to support all the weight of the dishes inside them. Obviously, the ship isn't as heavy as a kitchen cabinet, but this really seemed like a good secure mounting plan that won't have any screws showing on the base. It's a good plan for this. So with a baseboard shape cut, I thought I would add a chamfer along the top edge just to give it a bit of a softened look on the front edge. And after I did this, I started thinking that plain plywood would really look boring, even if I painted it. All the time invested in this ship, I think I need a nicer look to the base. I remembered that at one point, years ago, I wanted to give wood inlay work a try. So at the time, I had looked and found a great deal on eBay for a box of end cuts of exotic wood veneer. It was random cuts and whatever could be stuffed into a post office fit and ship box. I think it was around $30 US at the time, and it is absolutely stuffed full. Well, I never got around to starting that wood inlay hobby, but I do have an amazing box of veneer here. I like this dark veneer piece. I think it's Wenge, W-E-N-G-E. The green lines are perfect. To me, it looks like the ship is moving fast in front of the base. So let's go ahead and try to figure out how to do wood veneer. That's part of this channel, is to always try something new. So this is turning into one of those scenarios, like if you're cooking a meal and you have 3 or 4 things cooking and you want them to all be done at the same time. It's one of these scenarios. Put the wash on the back burner because that's going to simmer while I work on the base and the mounting system. So I decided I'm going to increase the size of the threaded rod a little bit. I'm going to have the threaded rod go through the holes in the ship. So the threaded rod on the aft of the ship is going to go through, and I can reach inside the port engine and put washers and a nut inside, and then washers and nut on the outside of the ship, and that'll mount a solid piece of threaded rod to the ship. Where the port side gun pod would be from the Rogue One Hammerhead Corvette, I'm going to drill through there and also do the same thing. Threaded rod, washers, and nut on the inside to give me 2 stable points. This is much more secure. I'm really happy with this. Note to future self, if, or I should say when I do this again, I will run a rod or a bar through the length of the ship, and then I'll drill and tap holes in them. That way the threaded rods that come out of the base could just thread into that rod that's inside the ship. So think, rethink, and then figure out how to improve on the next one. You know, that's part of the fun is improving the process and efficiency, but also the overall quality. Good lesson. This is a good lesson learned. I can't really put my hand inside the ship to do the same type of technique. So I'm going to use one of these spring-loaded wall mount clips that you would slide through a hole in the wall and then it automatically expands and locks inside. So for this, I'm just going to use a thinner threaded rod, but adding that third one is going to be more than strong enough. So I'm much happier with the mounting system now than I was previous. A bit of a project juggle here because I want everything to kind of come together at the same time and not have this extend out even longer than it has already. After drying overnight, the first veneer piece is done. I'll trim the excess to use for the other sides and then do an initial cleanup. The rest of the sides were the same process at the top, so I don't really need to show those. Just cut each piece, glue, attach with tape, and set aside to set and cure. With the mounting bolts in a much better place and the initial veneer drying, let's go ahead and finish the wash and the weathering on the middle and front of the ship. Overall, I'm pretty happy with the current state of the wash. I don't think I'm going to go back over the whole ship with the Tamiya panel line enamel. Just a few of the detail spots. There is a slight gap in a few places, so I'll make some sawdust from some of the scraps and mix that with glue to make a wood filler, and then just fill it in and smooth it. And once it's dry, I can sand that. To finish up the base, a bit of final sanding, and then a wipe down with a slightly damp paper towel, and then it's time to clean up this mess. I need a bench reset for the next phase. Oh, so much better. I love a bench reset. It just resets my mind as well. I have this plywood piece with the 2 strips on the top and bottom already from a past project, so I'll mount this to 2 wood scraps, and then I'll have a temporary wall to work with while I sort out the mounting system. Well, this is inconvenient. Even with pre-drilling the holes, I didn't expect this Douglas fir cleat to split, so I'll have to cut another one. I don't have the time during this work session to do that, so I'll adjust my schedule. I'll do the Danish oil finish on the base now, and then cut the cleats later. For the finish, I'm going with Danish oil because I want to protect the wood, but I don't want to stain it since it's already pretty dark. It's just simply brush on, let it sit for a few minutes, and then wipe off, and then let it dry overnight. And to avoid any fumes, I'll use the hose from my collapsible paint booth, since it has the inline fan near the window vent, so it will vent out any fumes, and I won't have to hear the fan. I got the new French cleats cut, and I went with plywood this time, partly because it's stable, but partly because it's the first piece I saw on the pile. Cut the length, the width, and then rip to a 45-degree angle to make a new cleat. I put the first cleat on the wall and make sure it's level. Then the other cleat will mount to the base and do a first test hang. This looks pretty decent, I think. Next step is to lay out the location for the 3 threaded rods. First, I'll find the center of the base. Then I found the lengthwise center of the ship and also marked that with tape. Somehow, while holding the ship and sighting the bubble in the level, I closed one eye, lined up the tape on the ship with the tape on the base so I could mark the drill spots. I think I needed a nap after doing that. I drilled the holes, first starting with a small drill bit, working my way up to the proper sizes. Being careful with the last big drill bits, starting in reverse to get through the veneer more gentle. The last thing I want is to tear out the veneer. Holes drilled and time for a first test fit and the first wall hanging. Oh my, that looks good. I've been looking forward to seeing this mounted and hanging on the wall, but I wasn't quite expecting that much of a dopamine hit. Several fist pumps and some woots. This moment was pure joy for me. I paced around happy, enjoying the moment, and just appreciating the accomplishment and hard work up to this point. It felt really good to get this far. It's so satisfying to see something like this that's been in my head for a while, fully realized and able to be looked at. It's a good feeling. The turrets on this version of the Hammerhead have 2 barrels on the front and 4 barrels on the main turret. I broke one of the barrels off the main gun, but I had printed a couple spares of the 2-barrel version. So instead of printing another 4-barrel, I'll just take a few minutes to repair it using one of the spares. Cut to fit, glue, quick primer, and base color. The engine thrusters at this point have a base primer and Tamiya AS20 on them like the rest of the ship originally did. With the planned LED install, I thought I would try accenting that light a little bit with some color. I started with a layer of Vallejo Air white, and then AK Interactive's Radiant Yellow, and then medium orange. For the outside of the engine thrusters, I wanted a metallic look of a material that looked like it could handle those high temperatures. The Vallejo metallic blue I have, it's just a little bit too light. So I mixed it with a darker metallic color and then applied to the outside and the back edge. Next up, the turrets and the antenna got a dry brush treatment, and then the main turret housing got a wash, and then a bit of Tamiya panel line enamel on some of those details. Now that I have the ship mounted on a stable platform, it's time to get the wiring done. Starting off with clipping off the old ends of the engine LED wires, I'll strip and tin those. After testing the LEDs, I solder on the LED leads, and then be sure to clean the flux off with IPA, and then add heat shrink. I've learned the hard way, if you don't clean flux off the wires, the wire ends will become brittle and eventually snap off. because flux is acidic. For holding the wires and the LEDs in place, I'm going to use a piece of this really dense foam that was used for packing material from an online purchase. I'll cut a rough cube for each LED. I'll drill a hole to snugly hold the LED and then CA the cube to the engine. One more quick test using the bench power supply before moving on. I think this looks pretty sweet. For power, I'm going to use a AA battery pack and one of these small switches that will friction fit into a hole I cut just behind the turret. I'll use a wire wrapping tool to spin the wire leads. Once that is done, I'll solder, clean, and heat shrink these leads. Time to connect everything together. There's the main wire already running from the fiber optic LEDs through the ship. And then as you saw, one wire from each of the engines. And the last wire is a power lead. I have these all running into a Wago electrical connectors, one for positive, one for negative, and they're underneath the turret. The last step is to connect the battery pack. The black wire will go into the Wago connector. The positive is going to go through the switch. So one switch lead to the battery and the other switch lead to the Wago connector. Pretty straightforward. One of the last bits to solve was the aesthetics of the threaded rod. They're very functional, but they're pretty ugly. I'm thinking I need some kind of cover over them. So after taking some width and length measurements, I used my fairly novice Autodesk Fusion skills and made these covers. Exported as an STL and then printed on the Bambu printer. To make the battery pack accessible, I'm going to put pins in the turret just so I can firmly fit it in place, but also remove it. This has been quite a journey on this build, having started it over a year ago and just putting it on the back burner while I made some decisions. And then recently just pulling it off the back burner and turning up the heat. This is such a fun experience. I'm really glad that I was able to document it and share. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I'd love the feedback. Let me know what other kind of builds you'd like me to try. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, take care, and we'll see you soon.